So I remember going to our 4th-year anniversary, went to Melbourne, but the whole time I was there and we were doing things and trying to really just keep pushing forward with the relationship. I just remember we went to get frozen yogurt.
You said that the one that we tried?
Yeah, it was the one that we tried. We really liked it. We really enjoyed the food, but at the same time, I was still like unhappy. Like I just didn't feel connection.
Hello, I'm Sam.
And I'm Amelia.
Welcome back to Us Duo Podcast where we aim to build a better mindset for better relationships.
Yeah, this week on relationships, we are talking about changes that happen throughout a long-term relationship. This is actually something that you guys have suggested because we did a poll. This was the highly requested one, so here it is, something that we're sharing for what you guys want to listen to.
Thank you again for that one. But to begin on the episode, it is inevitable that long-term relationships change as you mold and grow with your significant other. But we want to obviously understand what that change is, not in a negative connotation where, things bad happen and you split, but more in a fact of those positive changes as you grow with your partner.
Yeah, so let's explore that a little bit first before we go into the main juicy part of the episode. So when we talk about change and the shifts that happen in a long-term relationship, to you, what does that actually mean to you? Like changes that happen in a relationship?
So changes to me that happen in a relationship is more particular stages in your relationship, that transition period or whatever it is. So most cases, it's the most obvious is after a honeymoon phase. So there's a period that, you're all lovey-dovey, you're all fucking full in love. And then there's that point where it will change from that to something more serious. It slows down a little bit. And there's that transition period.
Yeah, and I think another change that I can always see and something that I've seen between us is also, it's not so much personality change, but I guess character. Maybe we become more confident or we become more understanding of each other or we speak each other's language better. Like those are some kind of changes that happen. So you become more as one rather than two individuals.
More as one.
We can't combine our powers.
That's pretty cute.
Yeah, so you're half a female now.
And I was fucked. Yeah, well, moving on from being half a female, I think
you have one titty and one man boob.
Wow, this is the things that I have to put up with. So. Moving on to something a little bit more serious, the next acceptable change that I'm thinking of is more related to more on those important transitions that may affect the relationship. So if you're focusing on your individual journey, that may have an effect to your relationship journey. And I mean things like your career or growth or maybe some major impacts in life, that can be a change to your relationship.
Yeah, then also the ones that aren't acceptable, I think, are more your non-negotiable, something that you came into the relationship and you have already voiced that it's something that you don't want or something that you don't really prefer to have in a relationship. And if you see that sort of changing and becoming more the non-negotiable or something that's moving out of your boundaries, I think those are the negative changes. So say maybe we started off with a really good relationship, good communication, everything was fun, happy, but then maybe the other person started to disrespect you a bit more, started to take you for granted. Those sort of changes are more the unacceptable, which leads into potentially thinking about a breakup.
Yeah, those are the heartbreaking moments that no one ever really wants to get into. And I do agree with those. That is you could say, the most important part of a unacceptable change. So it's really just making sure that we don't get to that point.
So now going into the main event of the episode. What are some common or generic areas or phases in a relationship that you see where changes can happen?
As I mentioned before, the honeymoon phase. So that's probably the most significant and the most common phase or change that I can see that does happen.
Yeah. Did you feel much of a change in that one for us?
The feeling hasn't essentially changed. It's more in the fact that now you know this person, now you get to know their habits, the small things that they like, but the drive to want to get to know more of this person slows down essentially. But it doesn't necessarily affect your feeling for the person. And I think that's the misunderstood perspective when it comes from the honeymoon phase, honeymoon phase to that slowed down transition.
That's really interesting because I know people talk about that and how kind of drops off and kind of becomes more of that comfortable phase, which I do agree. I think for me, I haven't had that many relationships, but for us, the honeymoon phase or that happy high feeling, the emotional high kind of feeling for me stayed quite a long time. And even if it was past that 6 months, 1 year, which is what people say the honeymoon phase is around, I would say I still had that emotional high, but it was more like I had a high alert where it's like I wasn't sure if you would stay. Like it was more like my own self-worth and self-value mentality where I was like, is this person actually enjoying staying with me? Are you actually okay with the things that I do? Are you actually, but like, do you actually enjoy me as a person? And although we were friends for 6 years, I still had that question because we didn't know each other on that kind of level. So that was always my question. So I think I was just on high alert for a long time, even though I am emotionally happy and enjoy being with you. But it was just more like, are you enjoying being with me? And I think it took a long time, even though I do feel secure with you, it still took a long time for me to let that guard down. That was my honeymoon phase. It was less of the like happy high emotion part, like that came with it naturally. But the part that was like the change and the shift was more like the belief in our relationship.
Which explains why in
What are you letting out now?
which explains why. So every anniversary that we have should give me a card, and we'll exchange cards. Sorry, we'll write like notes in it. And I've noticed that you could say the first six years, you were always saying the same thing, and there was a pattern, of very much like, hey, look, thanks for like staying with me, and I'm surprised that you are even still with me. That was the same similar sentence that she would always write, and I always would think back and go, hang on, 6 years of you asking that.
That's 6 years of high guards.
Like, it's an interesting reflection now that you've mentioned it, because now it makes me realize, oh, okay, shit. When I actually think back, yeah, you definitely kept saying the same thing, but I didn't realize that it was a high guard. I guess from my perspective, it was very much like, what is she on about?
And you never questioned it?
Well, I just think about it and go, oh, okay, I didn't really question much of it, but I had it in the back of my mind.
And you never questioned it.
But that's interesting that it took you that long to really drop your guard or even come to that realization that you're okay with it.
I don't think it was like, even though 6 years in I was still saying it. I think each year it would definitely get lower and lower, and I would still have confidence in our relationship. It wasn't that I didn't have any confidence and I didn't trust us or whatnot. But it was just more like the looking forward thing and seeing like, are we going to be okay? Are we going to stay for the long term? Even though if it's long term, like say another year or another 2 years, but I'm talking about like for the rest of our life sort of thought. That was my question. And because you're never going to have an answer for the future, and that was always what I was looking into. And yeah, I think that was more like something that I had to work through in my own mind, and seeing my own self-worth, self-value, but also seeing and just trusting in the future and trusting in us in that way. It's really hard to it's really hard to explain. It's not that I never believed in our relationship. I actually truly did, and I had full trust in you and full trust in what we are. But it was just, there's always like one little inkling of self-doubt where it's like maybe tomorrow is going to crumble, but it's like having to get rid of that one small 1% of that thought and being okay that we are okay.
Out of all the girls that maybe I've dated, you're the most different in terms of how your
I'm
train of
just
thought.
weird.
It's not weird. It's just you're thinking deeper, or you're thinking more on the longer term perspective. And I don't want to take the words away from my exes, but in the fact of how females would think, I don't know. I wouldn't have thought that you specifically would think like that. And this could be a question for all y'all listeners out there, females. Can you let me know, like, are you thinking this kind of things in your relationship, like especially like during maybe the honeymoon phase to more that medium stage where you've been with this person for 4 or 5 or 6 years? Is this something that you're thinking? Because I would like to know, because with her,
Yeah, let me know too, because am I the only one?
interesting. And there's no bad or there's no wrong in this. It's just curiosity.
Yeah, that was actually a long one on the honeymoon phase, but I think another one that's a phase. I don't know if it's like a phase or like a time, but I definitely feel, especially if you're gonna build a long-term relationship starting from your 20s or mid-20s, you're also in sort of a career building phase. So I think career definitely has a massive impact in how that affects the relationship too, because when you first start, like when we first started, we were just getting casual jobs and we were just working our hours, doing our thing, not much responsibility. And then you move up the career or the corporate ladder and you start to get more responsibilities, and that naturally increases either stress or things that you need to think about, responsibilities that you need to consider. And that does affect the relationship. But on top of that, a career helps build your confidence and you as a person, so that bleeds into the relationship. And I think that's, to me, I see that as another phase of change, because then that changes how we interact and how we communicate to each other. And in my sense, I think it was more confidence in us, or confidence in how I talk or portray something if I need to talk about something.
That point is actually a pretty big one in anyone's life. But while you're on it, how were you feeling at that time? Do you recall those moments of feeling like you're working on your career, but then also you've got all these other things like commitments?
I was going to bring it up later, but I think this is actually a perfect time. I think it was like 4 years in, we actually didn't have, there was a period of time where we actually were, I wouldn't say rocky, but it was just, we weren't connecting on the same wavelength. And then naturally from that, things either easily irritated each other, or when we did something, it just didn't sing right to the other person. So then again, irritated. But I think thinking back now, like why that happened or thinking what triggered that, I was going actually through a career change. So I was a paralegal for 2 years, but that actually wasn't what I was going for. I studied as Bachelor of Business for advertising, so I wanted to go back into creative. So paralegal is actually a high stress job. I was doing that, studying graphic design at the same time, part-time on top of my full-time job. And then I think also in that phase, I didn't have much belief in where I'm going in my career. So that may have bled into the stress on top of already a really shitty paralegal job. And you back then were quite fiery as well, because naturally that job that you had at the same time, a lot of people would piss you off, and not because you're easily irritated, but there's just a lot of shitty people in that position. So I think all of that just merged and fused together and just created not a good environment for us two together. So I remember going to our 4th year anniversary, went to Melbourne, but the whole time I was there and we were doing things and trying to really just keep pushing forward with the relationship, going on dates, going out and exploring, even in a new town that we don't usually go to a lot. I didn't feel happy, and I was just thinking that the whole time. I just remember we went to get frozen yogurt.
Said that the one that we tried?
Yeah, it was the one that we tried. We really liked it, and it was the first time we tried it. We really enjoyed the food, but at the same time, I was still like unhappy. Like I just didn't feel connection when we were there, even though we're there to celebrate our anniversary.
Is that your feelings?
Yeah. which you already knew, but I'm just like sharing it again too,
Yeah.
because it's been a while. It's been
Fucking
like
hot, red fucking vulnerableness. When I recall back, that year was pretty hectic. And yeah, you are correct in terms of like my character back then. I was pretty fucking red hot. And I used to fight a lot of solicitors and clerks and people because it's a fast-paced role that I was doing, but I was also managing a small team and trying to fix things and stuff like that. So it was very hard to balance that work, but also trying to keep that emotions from work away from my private life. And it is very difficult to switch it off, essentially.
well, I think at the same time, like I think it was a change. Like this is stepping stone into the change because back in the days when you were like that, and say you really had a shitty day because of these crappy people that you had to deal with, you wouldn't talk about it and you would just go home and your thought process was like, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to deal with it, I'm just gonna go home, play games, do my thing, gym, that's it. Whereas now, I think the difference is if you had like someone that really did irritate you, you would at least come to me and be like, man, this person was so annoying today. And it's not to bitch, it really is just to let your emotions out. And I think that's the biggest change I can see now.
Yeah, that is a valid point there. I would always bottle it up and just keep it in within me, which is actually not a good thing. And that was noticeable back in those days. Definitely a positive change when it comes to that perspective. But in terms of the relationship at that point in time, yeah, it definitely felt rocky. I didn't think that we were at a point where it was a breaking
Yeah,
point.
I didn't think it was that. I think that's the beauty of our relationship is that even though we come to these points where it can be rocky or we don't feel confident or one person doesn't feel confident in the relationship, it doesn't end in a thought of, is this it for us? It's more like, what next or what do we do now? Or it might be silent for a bit where we're just chugging along like that surviving but not thriving sort of mentality. But it never comes to a point it's like, okay, let's have a chat. Like, do we need to break up?
Yeah, and when I think about it, in other relationships, I would have just said, see you later.
Fuck that.
I was like, fuck that shit. See you later. I'm out of here. Back on the actual topic itself. No, I didn't feel from my perspective that we were going to say, split it off. But you could definitely tell that there was, I wouldn't say resentment, but there was just no real connection there. And for whatever reason, I just think that we were at a different place individually at that point in time, but then trying to merge our journeys together currently, or what's that, coexistently, like together. Yeah, I think that was the hard part.
Yeah, but it's interesting because last night you decided to whip out all those anniversary cards.
Yeah, so fun fact, I keep all my anniversary cards except for freaking...
I ask you to.
No, except for 3 years I'm missing for some reason. I don't know why. But
disappointment, you lost them.
Anyway, I decided to pull them out and reread all of the cards that you've given me. And it was just a self-reflection. I just wanted to see what your train of thought or communication style was like across the whole bloody, 10 years.
Did you see a shift in it then?
Hell yeah, there's a massive shift in
What's
terms
the shift?
Your confidence in how you write, like just expressing yourself.
Because I write hee hee at the end.
So the obvious is your handwriting's shit now.
Excuse me, I have fused into the digital world, so I just type
mate.
now.
Your handwriting has changed, but in terms of how you express yourself through your writing, massive change.
But
Used
how?
to
Like,
be,
what's the...
It used to be from half type of communication, like, I hope you are feeling this way. You're not confident. And like I said at the start, you were very much like, thank you for being still with me and things like that. That was a very common expression from you across 6 years.
And now I'm just like, no, you're stuck with me.
And there was a point where it stopped. So it went on for at least 6 or 7 anniversaries and then it stopped after that. Which I thought it was interesting because...
But I think you also wrote something like that as well.
You didn't read over my shit, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah. So why I brought this up was actually because just as we're talking about that 4th year anniversary, it was rocky, and then why I don't know, something in me just wasn't like wasn't like, oh, this is gonna end, and we just kept chugging along. And then on the 5th and the 6th year, what I wrote in the anniversary cards was that these were the best years, like since like best years I've had so far together. Really enjoyed it. So I think it just showed how we either grew together really well or we did move past this rocky point and really did work through our things. And it kind of just shows us, like ourselves, that if we keep chugging along, keep working on the problems, or keep moving along rather than simmering that this is an issue, like what's going to happen, it really does help us move past that point.
I think the important part to say keep moving along is it's the keep moving along, but keep communicating.
Mm.
And I think if you're both working together when it comes to that, it can work. But if it was one-sided, then I think it would have just went kaput.
Yeah, but I think that also shows just how much it can change within a year. Like now that we're talking about changes that can happen within a long-term relationship, it's knowing that there will be really shitty, rocky,
Moments.
stagnant times.
Yeah.
But within a year, I don't know if it was like exactly a year or maybe it could have been 6 months because we were writing this card at the anniversary. But just within that year, it just changed and it became like the highest point. So it shows how much it can change.
Yeah.
And I think the main thing is really just believing in the relationship and believing and trusting our communication and how we work through problems. And that really was what I was also believing in.
Clearly, because I could read it in every card. But no, it was good. But I didn't realize that until I really think about it.
A quick interruption. We want to thank all of you who have been supporting us. And if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube.
If you found any of our episodes helpful, please share to your friends and family as it would help us grow.
Now back to the episode.
I feel that the next biggest change for us was more on us moving in together. Now, me personally, I felt that when you moved in with me and my mum, that was my personal like change. Like I've had to really realize, okay, now that she's living with us, it's more on the fact of when you're living separately, you can just focus on yourself. You're very much, my time is my time, your time is your time, so fuck off kind of situation. But having her moving in to my home, it was very much, okay, I need to be more catering. I need to be more thinking about from me to we type of situation. I had to adjust myself really about how I did my plans, what I ate, what I was going to do with my friends or just to hang out and things like that. I always had someone with me. So it was really just working and planning along with you. That was a huge change for me.
It's interesting because when I moved into your house, I actually didn't feel a change. I didn't feel any shift. I felt like everything was same, like if not better. And yeah, I didn't feel anything like in terms of emotionally or like us as a couple, I didn't feel a shift or anything where I was like, whoa, this is different, or like, why are you treating me different, or like you've forgotten about me or something like that. Like I didn't really feel that.
Yeah, I did really well then.
Yeah. I did really well.
Nah, because for me, I definitely felt that pressure to go, okay, I need to shift my mindset from being me to we.
But do you think that was more something that you're holding to yourself?
In terms of?
Like you just felt like you needed to help keep the relationship going or something like that? Like do you think that was an expectation you put on yourself?
I think it was probably a feeling of both. Like definitely this is an expectation that I had to put into the relationship, but then also at the same time, it was more on me wanting to always, like I need to cater for you too, because now that you're living in the same household, that was the type of feeling that I was thinking at that time in that moment.
Yeah, and then I wanted to also bring this one up because this actually, because we were talking about how we had a rocky time, but it wasn't where we're like, okay, should we break up? There actually was a time where we did actually speak of those words because we're not that type of couple where like when things happen, we're like, oh, let's break up or maybe this is it. This was actually one time where we actually did question it, and it was, I'm a person who loves traveling. I've always traveled ever since I was young, and at least once a year I'll go back to Hong Kong because of family. And at the time, you weren't really into traveling. But to me, my thought process, I don't know if this is actually what you're thinking, is you're very set on having money and being stable and having savings and all that. And that led you into not wanting to travel because travel can get quite pricey or expensive. So every time I would ask if you want to travel with me or go somewhere, you're like, no. And it got to a point where you thought that traveling was going to come between us.
I don't recall the year of when this happened.
Yeah, I don't know when, but
But
it
I
was.
do-
Yeah.
I recall the feeling in the moment, and the reason why, and this is more on my own personal thing, but the reason why I felt that way and portrayed that to a relationship was because at that time I was living with my mum. So I had a pretty hard responsibility to look after my mum at the time.
Mm.
So all my decisions at that moment was very much like, okay, well, if I do something, how does that affect my mum? And I'm a massive person to try to cater for mum in a lot of those situations. So to me, at that point in time, that's why I didn't make decisions. Like there was a moment where we were thinking about moving to Canada for just career growth and just building a life there. But then I remember I said no because I didn't want to leave my mum here alone, because at that moment there was a few things going on in the background that I wasn't confident in, I would say, leaving mum here or leaving mum in Australia. So that's why I think personally, from my perspective, that was the hardest shift, but point in time, because I had to sort of think, okay, well, if I did anything, how does that have any implications to mum?
Yeah, so I think that was probably the only time where it could have been a change in terms of my priorities or terms of how much I actually thought into enjoying traveling. Because I've always enjoyed traveling, but I wouldn't say it was like my first priority. But I think that became sort of a crossroad between that is what I actually enjoy as opposed to what I want to do it with you. But on your end, it wasn't something that you wanted to put your time into either yet or at that time. So it did become sort of a shift or a change into, okay, what do we do now from here?
Yeah, and I remember the feeling about that conversation was because I personally felt that you as a person were someone that was very carefree. You would like to travel and enjoy your time. Like I could see you being a person moving to a different country, just dropping the fucking gun, like, yeah, I'm going to go, see you later kind of situation. So at that moment, I was thinking, well, that's the kind of character you are. So I would have thought that that was your future. I didn't think that Australia would be a place for you. At the time, and I remember this, thinking about this, I remember I always thought that you would have moved off to like China or some shit. China is
My
either China, Hong Kong,
hometown.
or you would have went like in a different country like Singapore or something and worked there. That was my train of thought at the time. That was the conversation where I was like, okay, I'm ready to let you go do that.
Yeah, which is an interesting period. But now we have traveled almost every year for the past 2 years.
Is it 2 years? Yeah.
Yeah, which is good. Like I think once a year is like a good amount where you work and then you save up to go somewhere and we earn enough money to be able to actually enjoy some time off. So I think it's been good.
Yeah, I think the big shift for me there is you work a lot, so you've got to take the time to have that break.
Is that like a mindset shift?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's a massive change.
Yeah.
And then just experiencing a whole different culture and the world. Like our time in life is so short. Why the fuck are we just slaving? Yeah.
Well, like another mindset shift I think that came on your end though is I remember this is probably 6-7 years in as well, and we were talking about obviously getting married or like weddings and stuff like that. And it wasn't so much the getting married part, but you really didn't see anything about weddings. And you're like, nah, I don't want to have a wedding, blah, 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 like things like that. So that was also a difference with, I wouldn't say that I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I want a wedding. But obviously every girl out there would love to be able to try on wedding dresses and, you know, get married in that sense. And I want to be able to celebrate some sort of happy moments with families and friends. So that was sort of a difference. But this one wasn't anything serious. It was just like a different in thought, and yeah, that was something that was different, and we had to to think about.
Yeah, so how are you feeling at that moment?
I honestly didn't really think too much about it. It was just more like at that point, because we weren't in like a engagement ready status. Like I think because you just got made redundant, but we're just talking about it as like a casual conversation. So when it got brought up, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But I didn't think too much about it where it held me back, and I was like, oh my god, is this it for us? It was more like when the time comes, I was like, we'll just have to talk about it. Like when the time comes of like getting engaged and then having to think about the wedding, what are we doing?
Yeah. Fun fact, I was actually preparing to buy her engagement ring, but then I got made redundant, and that absolutely fucked me because I couldn't find a job for at least 7 or 8 months. So the money that I had saved up for a ring was used to basically live off.
Mm.
So it was a bit depressing because I had a full ring, like custom prepped, we about to pull the trigger, and then this all happened. And I was like, fuck.
And then the pandemic happened, so
Yeah.
it set us back, or set you back for like 2 years.
Yeah, it's about 2 years. But even proposing to you, that was during pandemic anyway.
Yeah, I mean, but like the initial
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another shift. I think it's not really a shift, it's just like a change in thought process. But then we eventually did actually have a wedding, a mini wedding. It wasn't like a full wedding, but to see you change in that thought process. And it's so interesting to see because I see that in couples as well. So, say a couple starts dating, they're a few years in, and they're like, no, we don't want kids. But then the more you grow into that relationship, the more you know, maybe become in your 30s, then you're like, okay, maybe kids or having like growing a family might actually be nice to have. And I see that shift in other relationships too.
Yeah. And what I was really thinking about at that point in time was the reason why I was so hesitant about having a wedding was the fact that I didn't understand your true position on a wedding, i.e., how big it was, how many people, blah, blah, blah. So, my understanding of a wedding is it's going to be a massive, lavish thing. And because you're Chinese, traditionally, they have a lot of family and they do all this stuff, and, you know, you guys get it. So I was a bit hesitant in having something so big because my family is tiny. Now, I'm not saying that I don't like, sharing the experiences and then celebrating that moment, but I just didn't think it was feasible at that point in time or at that stage in life to really spend 50, 60, 70, $80,000 on a wedding that realistically is just telling people, family and friends, hey, we're getting married.
I think it's also back then at that time, like pre-pandemic, it was quite common to have a massive wedding. But then after the pandemic or during the pandemic, it became micro weddings, elopements, but then elopements with dinners and things like that. And that really did shift the whole wedding scene.
Yeah.
And seeing that and that people have to learn to be okay with that, that really opened up my eyes to micro weddings because I was definitely like, I'm not a person that's like, I've dreamt of my wedding since I was 5 years old. I was never like that. It was more like, do I go the route where everyone takes the invite 100, 200 people, a massive wedding, which is nice. Like, I think to celebrate and to be able to have people to come and celebrate, it definitely is nice. But one part of it was like, it didn't feel like me. Like, I don't like that massive attention. But then when I learned about the micro wedding thing, I was like, okay, this is probably something that's more aligned with me and what I was thinking, close friends, and then have like a dinner where we can all celebrate and, I don't regret going that route.
Yeah, it's more personal if it's smaller, but with people that you truly like want to share it with.
Yeah. Anyways, we're not here to talk about our wedding, but if you do want to talk about wedding planning and all that stuff, let us know. Maybe we'll do an episode on it. So that's some key areas I think you can see shifts in relationships and definitely in ours. So the honeymoon, the comfort stage, moving in, getting married, like all of that. I think those are key phases that I guess any relationship would feel or see shifts and changes in over the course of a relationship. But actually, while we're talking about moving in, so there's actually this stat that says from the Institute of Family Studies says when people move in together, 54% of first time cohabiting I don't know. Anyways, living together, couples living together saw their relationship end in a breakup within 6 years of moving together, and only 33% had actually tied a knot in the same time frame. So, we've actually moved in together since, what year was it?
Are you
2020?
talking about like as in us alone? So what, 29, when did pandemic 2020, right? 2019,
Yeah,
2020?
2020. So it's been 4 years. We have 2 years left to see if we break up or actually we tied the knot. So we did 33%. But I just thought that was interesting how they did this research on moving in together and how it might make or break, I guess. But from that point of view, I can see why. Because
Yeah.
when you move in together, you start to learn of the tiny micro habits that you don't see, and that might either become a quirk or an ick.
Yeah, it unravels the deep treasures of darkness of the relationship.
Mm.
Yeah. But it could also be a good thing, like you said.
Yeah, let's hope it's a good. But actually, there's actually been another shift in our relationship that I've seen, because relationship that I've seen. I actually have mentioned this to you where I felt this year we actually haven't felt as close to each other, and this was something that I brought up quite recent, and I was just reflecting on, like, is it something that we're doing? Is it a lifestyle habit that we're both putting or not putting in? Is there some sort of shift that we're doing? And my thoughts, I don't know if this is the same for you, is that this year has actually been a lot of hard work for us in different sense. So for me, I've actually been going through a lot of things where I'm trying to work on health, and a lot that takes up a lot of time to do that, but it's a lot of different things that I'm doing and just focusing on that and figuring out all these different things. And I think for you it has been career, because you're actually just coming the back of moving out from a job that you didn't like, but now you're transitioning into a new place. Not new anymore, but a different place where you're establishing yourself and you're actually enjoying this job. So you're working hard to either prove yourself or just settle into this place. So I think we're in two different places individually. But I think because of that, obviously we wind down differently. We do different things, and that may have affected in terms of us not actually talking to each other as much as we'd like in the way that we usually do it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And when I really think back or even just reflect back, it's really just I kind of feel like it's a similar situation as that 4-year moment.
Yeah.
But
similar
not as
situation, but I don't feel like it was as intense
Yeah, it
as
was not
that.
it's not intense, yeah.
Yeah, at that time it wasn't. I think I was definitely feeling very alienated at the moment. I don't feel alienated, but I can just feel that we are quite two individuals walking in the park and just walking alongside each other, as opposed to like a couple that's walking in the park holding hands.
Yeah, no, exactly how you said it. It's just this year has been pretty fucking hectic for both of us. Like even just to speak for myself, like coming off a job that I've been trying to work, like trying to make it work and not really working well with that, and also being sick from it as well. Like just trying to fix myself in terms of my health. Like I was actually pretty affected from working there mentally. So just trying to improve myself from that, but also just trying to start again, rebuild my career in a new place. And yeah, like it takes a lot of mental strength as well as physical strength to recoup, but also restart and rejuvenate yourself really in your own individual space.
Yeah, and like on top of that, it was also my work too. So I think what I would like to explain us is we became each other's supporters and less of a couple. We were just there to support each other in what we are lacking on the other side, but we weren't really doing on the couple or the relationship side of things. So that's the shift. Like we had to put the relationship more so in the back burner because we are trying our best to support each other on what we need. So even the last 6 months, it became we actually individually took turns being breadwinners, because at one point you weren't working and then I was like the one that was still working, trying to make sure we sustain, the financial side. And then quickly that flipped into you now becoming the one that's supporting. So even just simple things like that, it was just like chopping and changing and just supporting where we need. And it just became like this, what's that thing, pass the baton sort of motion. And I think because of that, had less time on the relationship side. So that's when I brought it up. I'm like, I think something's missing. Like I couldn't pinpoint what was missing. It just felt like we were just slowly distancing, not in a bad way where we're like, okay, we're not, well, like we don't love each other anymore. So I think it was just like we're feeling like we're just moving slowly more and more distant. And to be able to catch this early on, because you don't want it to be like too late and then you're like, well, where has our relationship
Yeah, it's
gone?
like, see you later, mate.
Yeah, so I think that's why I wanted to bring it up. And then also addressing the elephant in the room is I truly feel like we both have been on our phones a lot more. And that's what I brought up as well, is we originally had this rule. If we're having dinner, we're watching TV afterwards, that's how we usually wind down. We didn't, like our rule was like we can't be on our phones. But slowly that crept back in and I've noticed like you were on your phone and then I slowly became on my phone too. So we're on our phones but watching TV at the same time. And it's kind of
good.
unnecessary and it's not healthy. So we were like, hey, let's bring this rule back in.
Yeah, fuck the phone off and focus on us.
Yeah, like because when you're on your phone, yeah, you may be sharing reels and then you're laughing at something, but are we really having a conversation? Probably not. So to take that out and to try this all again where we can actually encourage proper conversations, and then like in our conversations sometimes we might joke around, like crack jokes and laugh at each other, do something stupid. Like I feel like that was missing. It's just the small things where we're just laughing at the stupid things that we do, because we're so focused on the phone you don't see the small things. Like say I tripped over a chair, like you didn't get a chance to laugh at me and call me an idiot because you were looking at your phone.
Yeah. And that was probably like the most important thing is the phone thing. I think the phone situation definitely had probably a larger or a significant impact, because you don't realize, like you said, that attention is not put on those moments where it's between us, and implementing that, you could say, rule where it's very much, this is our time, fuck the phones off, focus on us.
Yeah. And even before we go to bed too, it's just trying to limit how much we're actually doom scrolling, because I don't know for most couples, but I know it's quite common. Mostly the times when you go to bed, that's when most couples have their conversations. So even just to wind down and talk about what happened in the day or whatever. And we usually do that. But what I've noticed is we had less of that as well. Like even as simple as like, oh, today I had a shit day. And then I have the opportunity to ask you why, but I haven't had that.
Yeah, because you're too busy.
Well, we just haven't had conversation.
Yeah.
So
hopefully, implementing these I think it's had a change.
Yeah,
already,
it's quite
but,
recent and I think it's already working. So to the couples out there, if you're doom scrolling or on your phone a bit more, just put it down for even an hour, or set a rule where there's a space where you don't use it, maybe dinner time, lunchtime when you guys are eating together, and have more genuine, deeper conversations and connection.
Yeah. Outside of the actual phone situations, we normally have Saturday like dates, essentially. And I know most recently it's very much a situation where we would just do the most easiest thing in the past, which is like we'll just go get a drink or just watch a fucking Netflix TV show or some shit like that. And I guess getting in that routine, it's just consistent. It's the same shit every single time. And there's nothing that's really different, not really challenging or changing the environment as much. We have recently implemented the fact of doing cafe hopping.
Cafe hopping, or even just trying to go to different places where it's different. Also because I've bought a camera, and I think that camera has really got us to actually go out and explore, because then I can go out and take nice pictures, but then at the same time we're exploring a new place that we haven't been. And rather than thinking, oh no, it's too far or it's too hot or it's too cold, can't be bothered, and actually go there. And then going outside, not only is it good for yourself and you're actually getting vitamin D, provided it's sunny, but it's actually just a new environment, new things, and just trying different things rather than conforming to what you feel like is easy.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's just important to change things up. And that is, that can be applicable for everyone else that's out there in their long-term relationships where, things might get a bit stale. It's really just looking into changing things up just so you can, man.
Yeah, so ending with some final tips in terms of how relationships can change and when to pick up on these cues and what to do. What are some tips from you?
I think the biggest one for me is, yes, it is communication is the biggest necessity that I always talk about, but it's also bringing up those points where, like to mention what you mentioned before, is you felt something was a bit different and felt something that was a little off. So you brought that to our attention, and that's how it came about in terms of the conversation. So I think it's important to really be open and transparent when it comes to that type of conversation, because when things feel a bit off, don't ignore those feelings and make it apparent.
Yeah, but also when you bring it up, I think it's not making a fuss or doing like you had to put your foot down and like yell or something. It's just more like, hey, I actually do feel like something's a bit off, something's a bit different. Can we do something about it? And it can just be genuinely a genuine conversation. But I think another tip is like the biggest one before we even get into like the tips of how to work on it is, again, it's like revisiting a brief. We go back into your main thing, like what are your criterias, not the ones that you like when you're going to a date. You have like this guy needs to be, was it 10 feet tall or whatever? Finance.
I'm looking for
6
a man
foot
in
finance.
finance.
Fucking know that
6'5".
fucking TikTok, man.
Not that kind of criteria, but it's more like your non-negotiables, and are they actually hitting your non-negotiables, like these changes that are happening? And if they are, what are you going to do about it? If they're not, like how we're going to work through these and how can we keep moving on and keep strengthening the relationship? That's my main thing, is realizing, is it actually hitting your boundaries? And if it is, then why is it hitting your boundaries? Is it something that maybe it's just your temporary change? Maybe you're really stressed out at work, so you're yelling at me more, but to talk about that and then you change how you treat me again. Like it's just things like that.
Yeah, those non-negotiables are very, very important to yourself as an individual, but also for the relationship. And those non-negotiables are, like I said, those boundaries and those points where when it gets close to that, that's a point where you can bring that up and have that conversation. And really, it's just preventing things to get to those deal breakers where those changes get into that negative effect. I think as long as you can get to avoid that point in that moment, then that's where you guys can really work together.
Yeah, and I think understanding that change is inevitable in a relationship and change can happen, I think that really helps, because someone might go into a relationship and be like, this is how it is for the rest of my life and it can't change. That's the worst mindset of a relationship. Just like everything else, there's ebbs and flows, ups and downs, and understanding that will really help you prepare, I think, when change happens, so you're not shocked by the change. And yeah, really just remembering that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and you mentioned this, is your relationship is like an Olympics, the baton running squad. One person will be running for their dear life, holding the baton until the partner grabs that baton and is running as well. And without working together, you won't know what's really going on. So it's really just letting each other know, hey, this is happening, or I feel this is coming up, or, maybe changes in your life has affected you in some way and form, but realistically it's just coming together and making it work.
And then I know we talked about communicating changes. I think if you feel like something is off and it's still quite early, to me, it might be different to other people in the relationship. To me, I feel like it doesn't hurt to bring it up early, because then you're preventing rather than trying to fix in the long run. So when you're preventing, you're just like, hey, something feels a bit off, or like I'm not feeling like we're hanging out with each other enough recently. So rather than getting to the point where like you haven't spent time with each other for the whole year, then now you're like resenting each other without actually voicing that, just bring it up and just be like, hey, can we go out? Can we go do something? I just feel like we haven't really had a good chat lately. And It really does help. And if you are in it together, the other person won't mind. They really will just be like, okay, let's go do something.
Yeah. Remember, we aren't perfect, but the examples and things that we've spoken about are things that we tried and it worked for us. Maybe other ways may work for you and it may not work for you, but try it, see how you go. Let us know if there's things that we've missed as well in the DMs, because we are always happy to know what worked for you guys. We're in it to win it, baby.
In it to win it. We're in it together.
Thank you for joining us, and we will see you guys in the next episode.
Goodbye.
Peace.